What's going on, folks? I'm Latimer. Today you're tuning into the details. We're out here and I'm going to teach you how to be a better caster. We're going to talk about skipping baits on a bait caster. Skipping baits with a bait caster. There's a lot to talk about here. It's something that I know just about everybody wants to do, wants to learn how to do, is skip that jig, skip a chatterbait, skip a buzzbait, whatever the case may be. You want to learn how to skip that bait under a dock, under laydowns, for a couple reasons. Number one, it looks pretty doggone cool. You got to admit it. You always feel like you're the best fisherman in the world when you skip a bait, make that beautiful skip under there, and bring that bass out from under a dock, a laydown, whatever the case may be. Other thing is, there's just times where that's what you need to be doing. You need to be putting that bait where other people can't put it. So it's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of items that you need. There's a lot of know-how how to put that bait under where you need to put it. And today we're just going to break all of that down, so hopefully it'll make you a better caster. So as always with every details video, make sure you check out the description box. I'm going to leave a link for every piece of equipment that I mentioned in this video, so hopefully you guys will go there, check it out, and purchase it at sportsmansoutfitters.com. So when we're talking about skipping baits on their docks, placing baits under lowdowns, under laydowns and so forth, there's a couple things that I think you need to take into consideration when you're doing it. If you're a beginner, if you never skipped before, let's talk about setups, what you need to use, what baits you need to use, the line, the rod, and the reels. That's the three most important technical pieces that you need to consider. First off, talking about rods. When you're going to talk about rods, for me personally, I'm going to use a medium heavy to heavy action 7-foot. Not very rarely am I going to go over 7.2, 7.3. The reason for that, having a little bit shorter rod, you're going to be a little bit more accurate with the cast. You're going to have a long rod. You're just not going to be as much accurate. You're going to overcast your bait with a longer rod. So I'll show you the rods that I'm using here. I have one of my favorites. Of course, it's a favorite and it is a favorite. This is my Defender series here. I use the Defender series quite a bit. I also use a 6-stick. This is a 6-stick. This is actually a 7.4, but that rod actually works very well for it. But even though it's a little bit over what I like to throw, I like to stay around that 7-foot to 7.2 or 3 max. But that rod just has the right action for it. That's probably my only exception to the rule. Probably my favorite rod for skipping is this one right here, the Phantom Rig series. This is a 7'2". The reason I like this one is I don't have to have a rod just specifically for skipping. I can use this rod to do other things with, but I also can skip with it as well. But the thing is, you don't want a rod that's real stiff. That doesn't help you at all. That doesn't load well and doesn't cast the bait that well. You want a rod with a little bit of tip in it to help you load the bait and cast it. You know, it's real important when you're talking, especially if you're a beginner, probably don't start off with a jig. If you're beginning, never really used a lot of baits to skip on the docks and laydowns and overhanging banks, don't start off with a jig. That's going to be that's one of the hardest baits to get to skip correctly. Start off with something simple. Start off with a spinning rod to get used to making that bait work correctly. Start off with something really easy. Take a stick bait, a soft plastic stick bait, and get used to that motion of working, starting low, finishing high is where I suggest you start. If you are using a jig, a chatterbait, something like this, you know, I skip buzz baits a lot. Obviously we're here in the winter time, so we're not going to be using buzz baits and top waters to skip under anything right now. It's going to be more like jigs, soft plastics and so forth, shaky heads. If you're doing that right now, something that's going to help you, there's a couple things that I think is going to help you. Number one is your line choice. Use 15-20 pound test line is what I would suggest you guys use. If you're new to it, listen to this. I'm going to break a lot of hearts right here on this. Brace yourselves, get ready. Use some mono. It's going to help you. Mono is softer, doesn't have as much memory in it, especially right now. It's cold outside. If you go out there with fluorocarbon, 20-pound test fluorocarbon, and you try to skip a jig on the dock, it's going to end bad. I can promise you on that. So get you some mono. Mono's softer. The second thing is, if you're learning how to skip, have some patience. You're going to blow up some reels. I promise you, I do it all the time. If you use mono, you blow up a reel, you're out $5. You blow up fluorocarbon, you're out 25 or 30 bucks. So get you some mono. Get a couple rods, take a couple rods with you, 3 or 4 rods with you, and just be patient with you. You're going to blow them up. The reason I say carry 3 or 4 of the same type, because you're going to blow them up. I'm telling you, you're going to blow them up. I do it all the time. So do that. When you're talking about baits, use a really bulky plastic on your chatterbait. Use a real bulky plastic on your jig. You can see on my jig right here, probably start out with a little bit lighter jig. Don't start off with a 1/2 ounce jig. Start off with something a little lighter. On my jig here, I've got a Z-Man palmetto bugs on the back of my jig because it's real bulky and it's got a lot of plastic on there. So just think about a rock. When you go to skip a rock, you want one that's flat. You want one that's sort of big. You want it big, but you want it light, so it needs to be pretty thin. So think about that with your plastics. The more meat that you have on that plastic, the better it's going to skip across the surface. You don't want something that's going to dig. So try that. 3/8 ounce, 1/4 ounce jigs, something light. If you're really new to bait casting, don't start off with a jig at all. Get you a soft plastic stick bait, no weight on it, and just get used to making the motion is the biggest thing. All right, so here's one tip. If you're going to start off skipping a bait, obviously we're going to take this in small steps. We're not going to start off right out just trying to skip on the docks. 2 things you can do. If you're at home, practice on concrete. Just get used to making that bait skip along the concrete without getting the backlash. That's a good place. Don't even come to the lake. I suggest you just start out at home practicing. But for you guys that are a little bit more advanced and you come out to the lake, listen, try skipping your bait right out here in open water. I'm not even going to start out on the dock. The thing that we got to learn how to do, number 1, turn those magnets up. Turn your brakes up on your reel. Turn those to start off at the max, just to get used to it, so you don't blow up a reel and break your confidence right off the bat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out here in open water, and I'm going to start low. When you're skipping a bait, start low. Start low, finish high. If you start up here high, and then you finish your cast low with your rod tip, the bait's going to dig down in the water. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to get that bait to skip. Just keep your rod low, not a big huge back cast, and that bait will skip right along the surface just perfectly. All right, so let's look at a little bit of the equipment I'm using. I tell you that I like to use shorter rods. If you're looking for an overall rod that you can use to skip stuff with and you want to do other things with, this would be the rod I'd recommend. I probably talked about this rod so much in this series, the detail series, but the favorite Phantom series rigged rod. So much you can do with this rod. It works for me. For a reel today, I'm using Abu Garcia. This is an MGX. Probably a little higher on the price point range for a lot of guys, but this is just a good reel. I like to use a little bit faster one so I can keep up with the line if I get a bite on the dock. This is an 801 gear ratio reel, but the STX series is a great reel for you guys to use. Something that's going to help you guys when you're trying to learn how to skip docks is be patient. Boat positioning is everything. If you guys are co-anglers out here, you got to be patient or your boat is going to get really, really upset with you. Always make sure you get the right angle on your dock before you even make a cast. So you see I'm pulling up to this dock, and what I'm shooting for is right in between the sponsons of that pontoon right there that you see. So I'm just going to wait till I get into position. I'm going to start low and I'm going to finish high, and that bait will just skip right in there. But if you wait till when you're not in position, you're going to shank that cast every time. One thing that's going to help you guys when you're trying to learn how to skip is make sure you commit to your cast. Just make sure you follow all the way through with that sweeping motion. I always talk about starting low, finishing high. Starting here, finishing high. And once you do that, make sure you commit to the cast. Don't be herky-jerky, just a nice, smooth, fluid motion. Just a nice smooth fluid motion just like that. That's what always works best. If you're a football player or wide receiver, you're probably going to do just as many footwork drills as you are actually catching the ball. And it's the same way when you're talking about skipping. If the boat's not in position to catch the fish, or the boat's not in position to make the cast, it doesn't matter how good you are with your rod and reel, you'll never be able to make the cast and execute on it. The thing about skipping docks is you're going to hit the docks occasionally. That's going to happen. Don't feel like defeated if you don't make a cast just perfect. Don't worry about it. You just move on to the next dock.
just keep going down, and eventually you'll hit it right. Especially for you guys out there that are practicing and kind of new to this, don't beat yourself up for hitting a dock. Don't beat yourself up. You're going to lose a lot of baits probably when you first start doing it, so just don't beat yourself up too bad when you do that. Here we go. We're going to try to, this is what it's all about. When you're talking about skipping, you're almost always trying to get your bait somewhere that people don't normally fish. So as I mentioned, positioning the boat is everything. So I'm actually getting around the back side of this dock. That's how you really work these docks over. I made a cast on the other side, but we're going to make a different cast on the back side of this dock. The only way to get it up under there is by skipping it. So now we're all the way back on the other side, bringing the bait back this way. Because what if that fish was back here on this corner right here, that's right here in front of us? When we're fishing on that other side, that fish is looking out towards the boat. You don't even get his attention, especially in stained water like this. If we're in clear water situation, it'd be a little different. But that's why it's important to be able to skip a bait. So I'm skipping it all the way back to the other side again, but if you don't position the boat right, really none of this, it doesn't matter how well you skip. If you can skip really good, but you don't position the boat right, or don't take the time to get in those areas that other people aren't really getting to, it's really pointless to learn how to skip. So in all actuality, the most important part of learning how to skip is really boat positioning, especially in clear water fisheries. Those fish really like that shade that you'll have when you've got a dock that's really close to the water. In this situation today, you can see there's a lot of fixed position docks, so it creates a lot of shade. Those platforms around the docks, in and around the docks, that creates a lot of shade. And especially in a clear water lake, it's not, the lake I'm fishing today is a little bit more muddy. It doesn't make quite as much of a difference, but those fish like to hang out in the shade of those of that platform or the dock, or even of the black sponsons when you're fishing like on Lake Hartwell, where there's a lot of black. See, I hit that dock right there. I'm not too much worried about it, but they like to hang out in that shaded area around the dock. As I mentioned, don't forget, I'm using a jig right here. I've been skipping quite a while, so I'm pretty comfortable skipping a jig. I won't say I'm good, but I'm comfortable doing it. If you're starting, do not start out with a jig. Do not start out with anything with lead on it at all. Start out with a stick bait, soft plastic stick bait. Start out with something weightless. Learn how to get that motion down packed, and then kind of go from there. You can see this dock is going to be one of the most hard docks you'll ever have to skip. I'm going to get my arms real nice and loose. Don't be real robotic and real rigid when you go to make your cast. As always, I'm waiting till the boat gets in position, just getting really comfortable. You see one side of the dock's lower than the other. Start low, finish high, right in there, all the way back to the seawall. I'm not going to talk a lot about fish. All the way back in there. The only way you make that cast is by skipping it under there. Now a lot of people may ask, well, couldn't I just flip under that dock? Well, you could, but if you're fishing in really clear water, those fish are not going to let you get close enough to actually make a flip. If you're talking about visibility 8-10 foot of water, you can't get close enough to make a flip in there. If you get that close, those fish are going to spook off. So the whole reason that you're learning how to skip is so you can maintain distance. You can maintain distance from whatever structure you're fishing. If it's clear water, I can stay back 30-40 foot, still make that presentation and not spook the bass. The first thing that the bass hears is my bait hitting the water. So that is why we learn how to skip. Now, we talked about a lot of different things today, but really and truly the most important thing in making that cast is waiting until I got the boat in the right position there, more than anything. You can start low and finish high all you want, but if the boat's in the wrong position for you to make the cast, you still blow up the dock. So patience, folks. Make sure you take your time and get in position. Alright guys, so a couple points to remember. Just make sure you relax when you're trying to learn how to skip these docks. Make sure, most importantly, that you stand in position with your boat. Being in the correct position with the boat is everything when you're trying to learn to skip docks. Use some equipment that you're comfortable with. If you're not comfortable with a Baitcaster yet, just get used to skipping with spinning equipment. Of course, we all want to learn how to skip with baitcasting equipment, but you got to start before you can. You got to start small before you can run. So
Use that equipment, start off with something weightless, get used to starting low, finishing high, and committing to your cast. You're going to find out that it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be really rewarding catching fish, skipping baits on the docks. So as always, I hope that helps you out. I hope I broke down the details of how to be able to skip your baits better. For all the equipment that I mentioned that I used today in this video, check out the description box. Please make sure you subscribe to my channel. I love it when you guys comment and interact with me and let me know how you like the video. So I appreciate it. Make sure you guys come back for another segment of the details.